Very good evening. You're watching Free Press Journal live on YouTube. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. The National Education Policy of 2020 mandated a three-language policy, and the Maharashtra government in mid-April 2025 issued a government resolution, a GR, under the NEP 2020 framework stating that Hindi would be taught as a compulsory third language from classes 1 to 5 in Marathi and English medium schools. Now, that of course was received with a lot of resistance from the Uddhav Sena or the UBT faction of the Shiv Sena, as well as the MNS. And parents and students also feel that this could be an extra burden for a child to have three language introduced in grade 1. Now, from that aspect, I want to introduce to our viewers Dr. Sameer Dalvai, a developmental pediatrician, a very respected voice who has been vocal on multiple issues related to diversity, inclusion, child development. Thank you, Dr. Sameer Dalvai, for joining us this evening, and welcome.
Thank you and good evening.
Good evening. So, can I begin by asking you that since, just keeping the politics aside, the first thing that we need to do is at what age is it appropriate to introduce a third language for a child? I mean, assuming that most children are used to a local language and the medium of language that is there in the school, but now introducing a third language, at what age, according to you, is that appropriate?
I think it's very important to understand it's not the chronological age of the child which lets us to understand what the child can do or not do. It's the developmental
Mm-hmm.
age of the child. So if the child is developmentally appropriate, by around 2 years
Yeah.
of age, the child will be able to speak in simple sentences, 2 to 3 years of age, in the language
Yeah.
most commonly heard by the child. And by
Mm-hmm.
around 4 or 5 years of age, the child has a very good vocabulary in the language that is being heard very well by the child in a typically developing child. Thereafter, if you add other languages, as the child is hearing them, the child will be able to pick up the language as well. The point I'm trying to make it, language, as we understand, when you spoken language, it's always
Mm-hmm.
understood first, audiologically, verbally. The spoken language has to be understood first before you go on to reading and writing in that particular language. So if a child is developing normally, once the child has understood the process of language development, is able to speak in one language clearly, he or she will then be able to pick up other languages as well without any problem.
Hmm. Basically, you're saying that mother tongue is the first step, and one has to emphasize on being conversant in the mother tongue before. Am I getting you right in this? That it's a
So
step by step process.
there's nothing like, I mean, I understand there's a huge emotional connect around the word mother tongue, but it's the language heard most commonly by the child. So if my mother
Okay.
tongue is Marathi, but I've been
Hmm.
born and brought up in West Bengal, and everybody around me in my house
Yeah.
speaks Bengali. My actual mother is Marathi speaking, but it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. I'll
Hmm.
become Bengali first. So what is it that enters your ears and you understand first? That is a language. So the commonest language that you're hearing is what I would say is the easiest language for the child to pick up. And it's always a stepping stone. It's a series.
Hmm.
It's a staircase. It's a sequence. You understand one language, the construction, the grammar, the syntax, the vocabulary, the phonetics, the way you pronounce it well before you can understand other languages.
Yeah. Now, what we are hearing from the government of Maharashtra is that the idea is just to introduce Hindi in grade 1. This is not to take away from anything, and it is not even a imposition in the sense it's not even compulsory. There's a whole basket of language that is offered, and it is not a written. It's just a familiarizing, so to speak. Is there a problem with that introducing a third language at
First
this
and
age, at the first grade? Hmm.
First and foremost, I'd like to say that I'd like to stay out of the politics of all of this, and I'd only like to focus on the child development and the child's benefit. The issue here is I understand correctly, let's not talk
Mhm.
about the subject which you're talking about and whether it's a language or a non-language subject. Let's take it as a subject. If it's a
Okay.
subject that's being introduced currently at grade 3 and we are proposing to introduce it at grade 1, there must
Mhm.
be evidence to show that there is some loss to children currently when you're introducing it at grade 3 and not at grade 1. There should be an evidence to show some loss. And at the same time, there should be some evidence to show that, look, By starting it 2 grades earlier, you are actually able to give some great benefit to the child. If no such
Okay.
benefit can be proved to accrue to the child, there is no reason to introduce one more subject, an academic subject,
Hmm.
reading and
Hmm.
writing in that subject at an earlier
No,
age.
no, there is no
Because
reading and writing. There is only oral exposure in grade one and two, and the rest of it remains grade three. As per the revised policy of the Maharashtra government, they're saying this will only be an oral exposure. There's no
yeah,
reading,
but
writing. That stays with grade three.
I understand, but at the same time, the moment you put it in the school structure, see, it's very easy to say all this sitting in Delhi. What's actually
Hmm.
happening in the
Hmm.
schools in the rest of the country is totally another matter. So, what once you have a subject in school, the first thing parents will do is start preparing it before grade one. Because they just like when you go for a school admission at junior KG, parents have started
Hmm.
preparing the child since the child was born. So all these things cannot be ignored. And it's just
Hmm.
adding too much of structured learning to the child. And if
Yeah.
there is too much of structured learning, it's not going to help. Is now when we come to the subject of language. Language is something which is basically spoken. And if you have a good background of spoken language, then you can go to reading and writing. My point is, Hindi is a language which is largely spoken all across the country, especially if it thanks to Bollywood and things like that. So the children need to hear it in familiar terms in the regular day-to-day surroundings, rather than as a medium of instruction or an instructional structured thing in a classroom. I don't
Hmm.
think it's
Hmm.
going to add greatly by starting the
Yeah.
instruction in grade one that the child's overall life or there's any positive impact on the child's life. Now coming to
Yeah.
the issue of Hindi, which is basically the emotional content of the entire argument, that Hindi should be introduced. Like I said, everybody does speak Hindi. You go around most in Mumbai, in English medium schools, the teacher has to say, "Bachcho, English में बात करो." So
Yeah.
everybody is
So
speaking Hindi
there's no
anyways.
challenge. There's no challenge you're saying in exposure to Hindi that anyway exists. So why bother with adding this element of Hindi exposure, oral exposure in grade one? I'm just being the devil's advocate for a moment. I want to ask you that, when it comes to languages, I'm not sure if this is the thought behind it, but it's a conjecture that perhaps the idea is that, when you are younger, in that formative age, that impressionable age is when you pick up languages really quickly. Now when I try to learn a French or a German, I can't. But if I were to be introduced, if this language was introduced to me in grade one, perhaps I would have been fluent within a year or so. So do you think that is the aspect which is factored in here, that at least expose them to the language early so that they pick up the language?
Again, that's not a bad thought. I agree with you. But how much exposure is going to happen in the school in throughout the week that the child is going to get familiar with the language other than not introducing it? So, having one or two or three lectures or periods of that subject throughout the week where a teacher is going to come in and have a structured way of doing it, I don't think it's
Mhm.
really going to benefit the child to
Yes.
learn
Mhm.
anything or develop the brain any greater. On the
Mhm.
other
Mhm.
hand, there are so many other issues that need to be taught to a child earlier than what the child are
Mhm.
being exposed to. Security, for example, the good touch, bad touch concept, the looking after self, the ability to get along with other children, the ability to communicate, the ability to work cooperatively as a team, the ability to put off a bully, the ability to be
Mhm.
able to communicate if you are being bullied. And then there's the whole aspect of environment, which I think is the
Yeah.
greatest danger facing these children who will grow up after 30 years, 40 years, what they'll be facing. So, what we need to prepare today's children at an earlier age, if at all, and burden them, if at all, is for things that are going to impact them in their life later. Any language. I'm not just saying it may be Marathi, it may be English, it may be German. I'm nothing against it.
Mhm.
I'm only saying how is it going to help the child vis-a-vis the added burden that you're putting in as an added subject. Because the moment it comes in the curriculum, it gets structured. And that's not
Mhm.
what I'm in favor of at that early age.
Hmm. So I get your point. You're saying, in a introducing Hindi in a structured manner in curriculum, formalizing it in school education is not necessary. That exposure exists. I get the broader point that you're making, but I would still like to know, like, what is the problem? If is there an issue, or is there a language confusion risk that may arise if there are multiple language that a child is exposed to? I'm just asking that besides this debate, if a child is exposed to
For a
multiple oral exposure, can that create any language confusion or mix up?
For a typically normally developing child who has already picked up one language as he or he naturally should be typically picking up by the age of 5 years, if then
Mm-hmm.
you introduce another language, it is not a problem.
Okay.
I am also worried, however, about a large number of children that we are seeing now having a problem with communication, having a problem with social engagement, social interaction, and
Mm-hmm.
burdening them with too much of syllabus, not just languages, anything,
Correct.
including
Mm-hmm.
languages, is going to definitely overwhelm them. And I see, because
Mm-hmm.
maybe I see them all the day because I work with children with autism and special needs. A child who's not picking up even one line, we've this Sitare Zameen page going on right now. So I'll take that example. A child who's not neurotypical, who's struggling to develop these basic development aspects, if you overburden that child, for that child, it is very, very bad. In which case, you
Mm-hmm.
need to go far more slowly. Now, what happens
Sure.
is, even a
Sure.
school, if it's a curriculum and all children are doing it, then the parents of these children who are otherwise struggling are also compelled to try and gear up the child. So that is a
Mm-hmm.
straw that will break the camel's back. So, in view of all of this,
Mm-hmm.
as a development pediatrician, where I see children struggling with what's going on, I would rather advise that we pay more attention to improving the quality of whatever is being taught. Now, this ASAR report every year tells us that kids who have reached class 8 and 9 are not able to comprehend what is being taught in class 3 and 4. So, what we should be
Mm-hmm.
looking at is improving the quality of education in terms of what the child is assimilating and able to adapt, rather than just pushing on things onto their plate, which the child is not
Mm.
going to be able to
And that too,
digest, just showing
and
that I've
that
put
too,
it.
yeah, and that too for the politics of it. I know you said that you don't want to get into that, but let's face it. I
That's
mean, there
right.
is a discordance within the coalition partners. There is one party which is pushing for Indiaization. There's another party which has a Marathi Manus agenda.
Frida,
Do you
I'm
have
so
a view
sorry to.
on this?
Yeah, I have
Hmm.
a view on this that the most important thing to increase integration is not the language. The most important way of integration is how do you live together? How do you share? How do you tolerate and live with each other, work as a team? How do you teach children in the classroom to work as a team? And that most children have a natural ability to connect with each other, etc. We need to enhance that. Language is secondary. It's the human engagement and the human behavior that always comes first. I think we overrate the importance of language, and it's definitely a political issue. I'm not saying in this context or in India, anywhere in the world. Nationality, regionalism, language, they're all part of the same package. What our children need to do better in life is the ability to connect with others. Today, we have Satya Nadella, etc., who are CEOs in the Western world of very big American corporates. Why do you think they've been selected? For their technical ability or for their language skills? No. They've been selected for their ability to build a team, to deal with people issues, to look at man woman management. These are the aspects that traditionally in Indian society, which is a socio-culturally family-based culture, community-based culture, we were strong at. Unfortunately, in this entire mad race for academic achievement, and now this whatever newer things for language, we are missing out that fact which children learn while playing. Via play, you learn how to connect with each other, how to live with a group of friends, how to understand each other and accommodate each other. I think that is far more important than getting into this language debate or curriculum debate.
So you're saying it can be built into the ecosystem without literally shoving it down, the
Correct.
curriculum. I get your point. I
That's
also
right.
want to ask you, while listening to you, what I felt is that, perhaps stakeholders were not consulted. I mean, the likes of you who work with children day in and day out, whenever an education policy of this nature, especially when it has to do with language at a very younger age, and that's precisely up your alley, that's precisely what you deal with, the communication struggles of children. Do you think there should have been a greater consultation and these things are done in isolation by politicians without subject matter experts weighing in? And that perhaps needs correction in the way
So
policy is framed in our
I
country?
I honestly don't know whether there was any consultation for this policy. At least I was not aware about it, so I may not be able to comment about it. But the other aspect is when you're looking at cultural, I won't say the word imposition, but trying to bring in these things that affect children or children pick up or influence children. Please understand, the more subtle it is, the more insidious it is, the more easy it is for a child to pick up something. If you shove something down the child's throat, most likely the child will refuse it. But if you make it interesting, If you make it
Yeah.
look like you are just offering something and you allow the
Mm.
child to come, for example, if your mommy has prepared something for the child and you are a mother, you know that you go around the child forcing, ye khao, ye khao, ye khao. Even if it is the best thing, the child will develop an aversion towards it. But mommy and daddy are eating something and they make, ah, very nice, very nice. That fellow will come and say, kya ho raha hai? Idhar lao, mere ko bhi de do. This is the nature
Mm.
of childhood
Mm.
and human beings. If something
Yeah.
we find alluring and is made to look alluring, we are more likely to go towards it and adopt it. So I believe whoever
Mm.
wants to have this agenda of influencing somebody, we should understand that we need to do it
Yeah.
insidiously, especially
So,
when it comes
so
to children.
yeah, this is very interesting and very well said. What you're saying is that there's no problem with the exposure, but how you want to introduce it, the how is important. The method, the process may not,
So
this may not be the most
if I wanted
appropriate
to,
way of
if
doing
I
it.
wanted to advise the politicians who want to put in Hindi, I would say that show an interesting Hindi film every week. For example, nobody would notice
Mm.
it, or it wouldn't, raise the hackles of anybody. But the moment you see, I'm talking about that generation, an Amitabh Bachchan film. Even if I was from a Marathi speaking background, who doesn't want like to watch Amitabh Bachchan with his all the action and everything else that's happening there? And because he's speaking in Hindi, I want to understand what he's saying. That's the best way to have a cultural kind of bond or a cultural learning or language learning by doing it in a
Yeah, yeah.
nicer way. But the moment you make it
Mm.
into a compulsion, then there will be forces which will kind of oppose it
Mm.
and it gets
So,
into
if
an
your
unnecessary
intention
debate.
is really to get Hindi exposure, there are other ways of doing it. And frankly, Dr. Sameer Dalvai, I grew up in Assam and I was
Yeah.
not formally exposed to Hindi for a very long time. It was because of Hindi movies, as you rightly put it, that we picked up the language. I mean, otherwise, I spoke Assamese as I grew up and picked up English. And how did I learn Hindi? But because of, the movies that we watched. So, what you're saying is there are other ways of exposing a child, which are probably more effective ways of exposing a child to a third language. One last question. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I'm
no,
also
finish your
worried
point.
about
Hmm.
making it an issue. For example, a child would otherwise innocently have learned Hindi. Now all these issues are going on. Most children won't pay attention to these political fights. But some children
Hmm.
might, you are introducing it to them as a matter of conflict. So they
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
already
Hmm.
getting biased about it that, oh, I don't want to learn this. And in fact, you are creating a prejudice against what you want to instill. Even if you
Hmm.
wanted to
So
instill
it
it
may just
innocently,
backfire. It may have the
it
opposite
may
effect.
backfire because
Hmm.
you're creating conflict. And the most important thing as a development pediatrician that I care about, I mean, which language is not very important to me. For me, most important is to give the child security, safety, a sense of bonding with compatriots, with peers, with colleagues, and the sense of being accepted by others the way you are.
Hmm. Hmm.
If I'm going to say, oh, only if you speak this language, then I accept you. Oh, or only if you are good at maths, I will accept you. Oh, only if you are good
Hmm.
at algebra, geometry, I'll accept you. All this is exclusion. So we
Yeah,
must
so
be very
clearly
careful.
this is an appropriation of an issue for political purposes. There's no denying, and it's quite visible. And again, while hearing you, what one understands is nobody thought of the child or nobody thought of the
Yeah,
student really.
exactly.
The agenda was something else. I mean, it is just an alibi that is being used, but actually you wanted to further your own political cause. हिंदी में जैसे कहते हैं कि राजनीतिक रोटियां सेकने के लिए. But one last question around, the topic that we put out, and we said that this is children caught in the language crossfire. So, do you believe that these sort of issues, children should be at least kept aside? By all means, go ahead, fight your political battles, but don't do it at the expense of growing up children. Formative age, young children in school, who for whom language is such an important issue that builds confidence. Do you think that we should? There's some areas which should be kept aside, which should not, venture into that area when you decide your issues for politics. Is that possible?
Absolutely, because like they say, if in war, you will never attack civilians and certainly not women and children. So there was a sense, and I'm using the word in the past tense, there was, because things seem to be getting different now. But the point here to understand is, what, as a development pediatrician, you've called me today because there's a political conflict. Whoever talked
Hmm.
about what is good for our child's development otherwise? I think
Hmm.
there is the issue about politicians will do what they have to do. It's the parents who
Hmm.
have to come up and engage in this discussion about what is really, really very good for your child. And that will make the
Hmm.
politicians stay away. The other side of it
Yeah.
is indoctrination is easiest at a younger age. The converse is
Yeah.
also easier to put getting children into their ideology. So parents are the ones who must understand that this is not something that will necessarily make their child's ability to deal with life successfully better. And parents need to come up what is going to make my child's life better. For example, the biggest danger now is this pervasive onslaught of technology and screens and mobiles and phones and digital technology inside classrooms. And the danger is it's even gone to the preschool level. The real debate, the real political fight should have been whether you will allow digital gadgets in schools, in preschools, in primary schools. And that is what Australia has done, Sweden has done. Unfortunately, nobody is talking about the real dangers for children
Yeah.
development. And I think we should move this controversy away from these political agendas to a child-based agenda, which is why the Indian Academy of Pediatrics has written articles and proposed that there should be an independent ministry of children and adolescents, which will be invested with the ability to focus only on children's problems and keep all the adult issues and the political issues aside and work only for the benefit of our children. We always say बच्चे देश का भविष्य है बट वर्तमान जो है वो आगे के भविष्य छोड़ के अभी वर्तमान में क्या करना है पॉलिटिकली उसके ऊपर सोचते हैं ये थोड़ा सा चेंज होना चाहिए एंड इट इज द पेरेंट्स शुड कम अप एंड से हमारे बच्चे के लिए हमको क्या करना है उसके लिए हमें टेक्निकली साइंटिफिकली कल्चरली सोचना चाहिए
Bilkul. I'll close with this comment, Dr. Sameer Dalvai, that has come, which says, Sameer ji, ये सब PMC election की वजह से हो रहा है. So that is a comment on what you just said, कि, we should not, worry too
कैन
much
आई जस्ट
about
से
this. After
समथिंग
all, yeah.
क्या उनका काम अहले सियासत वो जाने बच्चों का
Hmm.
काम पैगाम में मोहब्बत जहां तक पहुंचे तो कम से कम बच्चों को इससे
Okay.
दूर रखिए
But बच्चों को बख्श दे. And there's another comment which says there are so many Marathi schools getting closed in the last few years. So let's talk about real issues, where if you really want, those. This is perhaps for those who are saying that with this the Marathi language will be threatened. So there are people who believe that if you really worry about Marathi language being threatened, look at the issues that are actually threatening the Marathi language. It is not the oral exposure to Hindi, it is something else. Really appreciate these comments coming in, and there are others also who are very concerned why Hindi from first standard. So clearly, not many people are in favor of this decision. Maybe with that, Dr. Sameer Dalwai, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your views with us. Always appreciate your words and your thoughts on the program. Thanks very much.
थैंक यू अफ्रीदा थैंक्स लॉट
My pleasure. So I'm going to leave viewers with this particular soundbite that has come from Sanjay Raut, who's obviously opposing this introduction of Hindi as a third language. You
स्कूली
might call
बच्चों
it
के
party
ऊपर एक बोझ
politics,
है
but let's listen in.
ये एकेडमिक आपको आप कंपलसरी करेंगे ये स्कूली बच्चों के ऊपर एक बोझ है ये एकेडमिक विषय भी है ये भाषा का विषय भी है और भी कुछ है तो इस बारे में राज ठाकरे जी ने एक आंदोलन की घोषणा की थी 6 तारीख को और माननीय उद्धव ठाकरे साहब ने घोषणा की थी 7 तारीख को दो अलग अलग मोर्चे निकल रहे थे एक ही विषय पर तो एमएनएस चीफ राज ठाकरे जी ने कल मुझे फोन पर बताया कि भैया ये ठीक नहीं लगता है विषय एक है हमारा और मराठी मानुस के दो दो बड़े मोर्चे निकलेंगे उसे मैसेज ठीक नहीं जाएगा हमको एक साथ मोर्चा निकालना है और सबको उसमें शामिल करना है तो मैंने उस बारे में माननीय उद्धव जी से बात की उद्धव जी ने भी हाँ कहा कि ये बात सही है हमारे भी कोई इसका अहंकार नहीं कि अलग अलग मोर्चे निकाले लेकिन रविवार को महाराष्ट्र में बड़ा त्योहार होता है आषाढ़ एकादशी का पंढरपुर विठल का तो लाखों लोग वहां चले जाते हैं तो मोर्चा को सफलता नहीं मिलेगी तो आप राज ठाकरे जी से पूछिए कि हाँ क्या हम डेट बदल सकते हैं एक तो आप 7 तारीख में शामिल हो जाइए नहीं तो हम 5 तारीख को करेंगे तो राज ठाकरे जी ने कहा कि ठीक है हम 5 तारीख को करेंगे अभी हम दोनों मिलकर शिवसेना एंड एमएनएस दोनों मिलकर 5 तारीख को इस बारे में हमारा आंदोलन शुरू करेंगे
सर अमित शाह ने कहा है कि हिंदी भाषा किसी का दुश्मन नहीं हो सकता क्योंकि महाराष्ट्र में शक्ति
देखो अमित शाह ही महाराष्ट्र के दुश्मन है अमित शाह को सब जिस व्यक्ति ने बाला साहब ठाकरे जी की शिवसेना को इस प्रकार से तोड़ा है, चुनाव आयोग और सुप्रीम कोर्ट में हाथ में लेकर, वो महाराष्ट्र का दुश्मन है ना। उनकी बात हम क्यों सुननी चाहिए? हम उनकी बात नहीं सुनेंगे।
सर जिस तरीके से आरएसएस की तरफ से बयान आया, 50 साल पूरे हो गए थे इमरजेंसी को, वही आरएसएस कह रहा है कि जो जिन्होंने इमरजेंसी लगाई अब वही कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन की कॉपी लेके घूम रहे हैं, उनको माफी मांगना चाहिए बाकी जनता से।
बाला साहेब देवरस ने इंदिरा गांधी जी की इमरजेंसी को पूरा समर्थन दिया था, वो पूरा डॉक्यूमेंट सामने है। इंदिरा गांधी ने संविधान के अधीन रहकर इमरजेंसी लागू की थी। जैसी आज अनडिक्लेयर्ड इमरजेंसी, अघोषित इमरजेंसी, वैसी नहीं थी। बाला साहेब देवरस ने आपातकाल को समर्थन दिया था। या अगर किसी को उसके डॉक्यूमेंट चाहिए तो मेरे पास है, मैं उनको दे सकता हूं।
उनका आंदोलन 6 तारीख को है, तो इसलिए जिन्होंने ये शक्ति का पर्याय लाया था वो लोग अभी आंदोलन कर रहे हैं। ये आपके माध्यम से बताने के लिए मैंने ये प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस ली थी।
सर, दूसरा एक सवाल है कि विधानसभा चुनाव को लेकर विधानसभा चुनाव पर सवाल खड़ी करने वाली याचिका जो दायर की थी बॉम्बे हाईकोर्ट में, उस याचिका को खारिज करते हुए बॉम्बे हाईकोर्ट ने याचिका को पूरी तरीके से तथ्यहीन बताया है। याचिका खारिज कर दी गई है, कल उसका फैसला आया, क्या कहेंगे सर? प्रकाश अम्बेडकर ने जो याचिका दायर की,
यानी जो इलेक्शन हुआ वो सही था ना?
हाँ, मतलब
चुनाव के दौरान जो 5 बजे के बाद
नहीं, बराबर यानी जो इलेक्शन हुआ था वो सही था। दिल्ली वाले क्या कल बोले कि वो गलत था, तो मैंने कल ही बोला था कि अगर गलत है कि कांग्रेस के जो चुन के आए हुए सब एमपी है उन्होंने रिजाइन करना चाहिए अगर गलत है तो, और जो विरोधी पक्ष नेता है लोकसभा में उन्होंने भी रिजाइन करना चाहिए। अगर उनको रिजल्ट पसंद नहीं है तो क्यों रहते हो, रिजाइन देना चाहिए।
सर, एक अंतिम सवाल है। कर्नाटक में कांग्रेस की सरकार है, तमाम जो है लोक लुभावने वादे किए गए, लेकिन अब कर्नाटक सरकार लगातार जो है फंड की कमी का हवाला दे रही है। महाराष्ट्र में सर क्या कारण है कि जितने भी वादे किए गए सब सुचारू रूप से चल रहे हैं, वादों को पूरा किया जा रहा है, कर्नाटक मॉडल क्यों फेल हो रहा है, क्या लगता है सर?
नहीं, कर्नाटक के बारे में बोलने का अधिकार मुझको नहीं है, लेकिन देवेंद्र जी के नेतृत्व में, माननीय एकनाथ शिंदे साहब के नेतृत्व में और अजीत दादा के नेतृत्व में हमने जो जो कमिटमेंट की थी वो हम पूरा कर रहे हैं और पूरा करेंगे।
साहब, एक आखिरी सवाल, यहाँ पर अगर देखें तो नेताओं को खुश करने के लिए चांदी की थाल में खाना परोसा जाता है, जहाँ पर महाराष्ट्र में भूखमरी जैसी परिस्थिति है, तो इसे आप किस तरह से देखते हैं एक लोक प्रतिनिधि होने के नाते?
ये कहाँ हुआ?
विधानभवन।
उसको मालूम नहीं है, लेकिन इसकी इन्फॉर्मेशन मैं खुद लेता हूँ। प्लेटिंग का था या चांदी का था, पहले देखता हूँ, बाद में बोलता हूँ।
सर, एक प्रश्न है। उपमुख्यमंत्री अजित पवार यांच्या नियोजन विभागाने महाराष्ट्र राज्य रस्ते विकास महामंडळाच्या आर्थिक नियोजनासंदर्भात एक स्वतंत्र मागणी केली आहे चौकशीसाठी एकनाथ शिंदेच्या नेतृत्वाखाली।
कोणी केली?
अजित पवारांच्या नियोजन विभागाने,
अजितदादांनी केली, विभागाने केली? विभागानं म्हणजे कोणी?
वित्त विभाग।
नाही, मला असं वाटतं की सरकारमध्ये अधिकारी काहीतरी लिहित असतात, पण ठीक आहे, ते आधी काय लिहिलंय ते आधी पहिले वाचतो आणि मग त्याच्यावर आम्ही आमचं मत प्रदर्शित करतो।
दादा, सरकार ने जो फैसला किया है उसको
नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी, राष्ट्रीय शिक्षण पद्धति, इसके अनुसार त्रिभाषा सूत्र पहली और दूसरी कक्षा में मौखिक तौर पर और तीसरी इयत्ता से लेकर लिखित स्वरूप में जो भारतीय 22 भाषाएं, उसमें से जो भी विद्यार्थी पालक भारतीय भाषा में से जो भी 22 भाषा में से भाषा चुनेगा उसको वो भाषा पढ़ाने का प्रबंध महाराष्ट्र शासन की तरफ से किया जाएगा।
लेकिन इसका जो आप अलग अलग नेताओं से भी मिल रहे हैं, जो विरोध हो रहा है, जैसे कि उद्धव ठाकरे और राज ठाकरे कह रहे कि हम मोर्चा निकालेंगे, हम सड़क पर आएंगे। उन्होंने सभी लोगों को कहा है कि बिना पार्टी का झंडा लिए सब लोग इसमें शामिल हो जाए, तो एक बड़ा विरोध प्रदर्शन करने वाले।
राज्य के विद्यार्थी आने वाले दिनों में देश लेवल पे अलग अलग क्षेत्रों में वो प्रतिनिधित्व करेंगे। तीसरी भाषा के तौर पर जो गुणांकन सिस्टम है उसमें से उनको भी पॉइंट मिलना चाहिए, और भविष्य में जो देश लेवल पे शिक्षण पद्धति की गुण पद्धति का प्रवास होने वाला है, मैं समझता हूँ उसमें तीसरी भाषा को भी महत्व है। और इसी बात को सामने रखते हुए भारतीय 22 भाषाओं में से कौन सी भी एक तीसरी भाषा चुनने का विद्यार्थी और उनके पालक को उनके ऊपर दिया गया।
लेकिन किंतु सरकार ने कई बार ये स्पष्ट कर दिया।